BrewTV, your one and only beer and brewing TV show located right here in Perth. Every week we'll be exploring the world of beer and brewing in Western Australia, from the home brewer to the professional breweries and everything else in between. And for you cider drinkers and ginger beer lovers, we'll also include you as well. You know, I've been thinking about doing a beer and brewing show in Perth for a very long time. Something that really shows off the diversity.
Now, that's a good idea.
Ladies and gentlemen, Gary Eddy, co-producer and a reformed beer czar.
We plan to have a lot of fun. We've got an awful lot to cover in half an hour show, but we're going to give it a good go.
But don't worry about these old guys too much. I'm going to make sure there's plenty in there for the younger generations.
You know, WA is a big place. There are a lot of beer styles out there and there are a lot of people making them. Tonight, we've travelled south to bring you this show. We've brought in one of our good members of the brew crew here. This is Marlon, and he's going to learn how to do home brewing for the very first time. Now, I started home brewing about 13 years ago, but Marlon, this is your very first home brew, so I'm going to show you the way I was taught. There's no right and wrong way to learn, but there's some certain things that we have to take into consideration. The first thing is sterilisation. We have to obviously clean everything. Because beer is alive, beer uses a live yeast, and if there's any contamination, the yeast won't survive and you'll get funny tasting beer. This is your stock standard fermenter. Plastic container, you can get these at all the home brew shops. It holds about 30 litres, some of them. This one actually holds about 25 litres, but I've put a little mark here because we make our brews up to about 23 litres. So, this is the fermenter. We have the lid, and the lid has an O-ring, and it has another little hole and an O-ring in here, and that is for the airlock. And we'll show you the airlock a little bit later, and you'll see it in action in a couple of days' time. Now, the hole in the front, obviously once the beer is made, we need to get the beer out in a nice, simple, easy way. So, it comes with a little tap, which also has an O-ring. And this little funny thing at the bottom here is also called a sediment trap, because you will get sediment. The yeast breaking down all the sugars will create a lot of sediment at the bottom, so you just don't want to have too much of that going into your bottles. So, scrubbing brush, obviously to clean, you've got to scrub. Mixing paddle, because if you use a spoon you can mix it, but the less you can get into here, the better. So a nice paddle, you can mix outside of the tank. Getting onto our hydrometer, this is going to tell us the specific gravity of our beer, which helps us determine the alcohol at the end. Right, one of the first things we have to do before we start any home brew is sterilise it. So no rinse steriliser, a couple of spoons into a dish, run some water through there. Once this dissolves, it's your job to start scrubbing. Excellent. I think you like that. I've scrubbed enough of these in my lifetime to deal with it. So we just need to dissolve this. If you grab the paddle, okay, we just need to get this dissolved so we can get this working. Now you can buy this in bulk, you can buy it in smaller sachets, but if you're going to get into homebrew seriously, invest in, you know, this is a kilo, and this will last you a fair while. So no rinse steriliser is one of the things you can use to sterilise your equipment. You can also use it to sterilise bottles. The reason why it's no rinse steriliser is simply you don't need to rinse it afterwards. I use about 3 or 4 different cleaners in my systems, and I try not to use the same cleaners all the time because you will get bugs and bacteria building up, and even foreign yeasts that will bring immunity, and they'll build up a tolerance to certain chemicals that you'll use. So it's good to have a bit of a mix, but yeah, give it a go. Okay, so rookie error number 1, make sure you put your tap in the bottom of the fermenter, because a few times people have spilled an awful lot of stuff in their darling wife's kitchen because they haven't screwed this in. Now, it doesn't have to go on too tight because the O-ring will help it seal, and you just make sure that the tap is closed. So we pour in the concentrated cleaning solution into here. And we can pull that out there. We'll add a bit more water. And spill this all over the kitchen. So now that we've got this up to about 5 litres of water, Marlon, as your initiation into the brew crew, it's time to start scrubbing. Give it a good scrub. Where these handles are and underneath the lip is always a great place to scrub, because if you've had a beer in here before, this is where you'll tend to get a lot of your mess building up. And we'll take out the tap and give the tap a good scrub as well. Marlon, great job at washing and scrubbing the fermenter. We've scrubbed the lid, scrubbed all the inside of the lid, scrubbed around the O-rings, took the tap out and scrubbed around the tap as well. Very important. I'm a stickler for hygiene when it comes to beer, because if you get a tainted beer, you've ruined a whole batch. We are going back to basics. The good old Cooper's Homebrew Kit. I think everyone started off with the Cooper's Homebrew Kit. They were one of the first companies ever to make homebrew in Australia. So we're just going with what most people have probably started with. Now, this is your traditional kit and kilo. This is the pre-made wort, the concentrated wort. This is one of the brew enhancers. So it gives the beer a bit more body, a bit more mouthfeel, and overall a better flavour. So, your can comes with yeast. So this is the yeast, the brewing yeast. You can actually buy these freeze-dried packets of yeast in all your home brewing shops as well. And you can buy liquid yeasts as well, which we'll show you in future episodes. So we need to open this can and get this prepared. This is basically concentrated, it's like treacle. On a cool day, you need to warm it up a little bit, otherwise it'll take forever to come out of the can. So we'll get this open and we'll get this warmed up and we'll get starting to make our first home brew. We've got the can sitting in a bit of boiling water just to soften up that treacle-like mix. Marlon, what did you think of the taste?
Oh, magnificent.
Magnificent?
Magnificent.
Wait till it actually becomes beer.
Ooh.
So one thing I learned early in the piece was add a couple of bowls of warm water, just out of the tap's fine. You don't want too much heat, because cooling it down, you've got to pitch your yeast at a certain temperature. So not too much hot water or too much warm water, because it will take a long time for this to cool down. So I've just put in a couple of jugs of warm water, so that when we throw in our concentrated wort, it doesn't stick to the bottom, and it makes it a lot easier to mix. Now, instead of standing here for ages waiting for this treacle-like mixture to dissolve, or to actually come out of the tin, because you'll be here forever, what we do is we use this now as the jug to start pouring water into the fermenter. What you do is you swirl it around. I'll just sterilise this. So basically now, Marlon, everything that goes into this fermenter has to be clean and sterilised. So we've given this a good clean. If you can just start slowly stirring this, you'll find it's quite tough and sticky at the moment, but it will soften up as you start dissolving it out. I'll get a bit more warm water in there. Now in future episodes we're going to talk about water. There's a lot of you out there right now that are probably horrified that I'm actually using tap water. Personally, I've always been told if it's good enough to drink, it's good enough to use in your brew. Now, for those of you who like a mid-strength beer, or you don't like the higher alcohol content, you can just add a can and add your yeast. And that will bring it up to around 3% alcohol. Marlon, you like a fuller strength beer. You're not really wanting to try a mid-strength as your first home brew. So we're going to add the sugars. This was the brew blend, a kilo of the sugars. Now when I say sugars, it's everything. This is dextrose, which is a form of sugar, maltodextrose, which is the sugars from the malts, and it also has just some malt extract, and the malt extract will give it the better body. So in this goes as well, and you just keep stirring that around because this will dissolve quite quickly because it has got a lot of dextrose in it, but you need to give it a good mix around now, Marlon. Okay, so what we need to do is we just top up the levels of the water. Right, so this is the 23 litres of your very first home brew, but it's not quite beer. At the moment, all we have is a watered down version of the Australian Pale Ale wort. One thing I will do now is just close this lid. The less you can keep the open vat now open to the air, the less chance you've got of getting infections from wild yeasts. But the more we can keep this contained while we get it to the ideal pitching temperature, the better. So this is where our airlock comes into it. This is our airlock. We've given it a good sterilise. And the good thing about the no rinse steriliser is you can actually use this as the water in the airlock. Now it sits like this, and this is the airlock with the water in it. And you just push this into there. And you can close up the lid. You can just hear that O-ring starting to bite. Now we'll just leave that closed for now because I'm just watching the temperature here. We just need to get that temperature down a little bit before we start pitching our yeast.